I think also, like, I just had no appreciation for what it meant to record all acoustic instruments, because I'd never even recorded live drums before. Like, that was the whole thing. I was like, what the hell? They're asking me, oh, how do you want the drums to sound? I'm like, me? I don't know.
I don't know what plugins you got.
I know. I was like, I don't know. I don't know how to play drums. I don't even know what the drums are called. They say the most bizarre things to you in hospital. They're like, oh, people could just have aneurysms walking around and they just have no idea. I'm like, don't say that to me. What do you mean?
That's not helpful.
And, like, people will come up to you afterwards. They'll be like, oh, my auntie had an aneurysm. I'm like, oh, how is she? Like, oh, she died from it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Not what I needed to hear.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad.
Oh, there we go.
That's good.
Sorry. Hello, Cara. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. My dog's about to pop off because someone is going through our bins to get cans. So
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Has a conniption fit.
That old chestnut.
What type of dog?
She's a little miniature schnauzer, and she's
Oh.
she's got a problem with everyone. So no one's allowed to walk past the house. Least of all the guy who's going to take things out of the bin. So
Yeah. I love schnauzers. They're great.
I've got two of them. The other one's hiding. He's a sensitive boy.
Yeah. You got one of each type.
My parents have a dog that's exactly the same. Sorry, different breed, but in terms of anyone walks past the house, it's just barking and not letting anyone past, and nothing can move out the window without everyone being aware that something is moving outside the window.
Yeah, they're protecting the place. I'm always like, look, I got it under control. You don't have to worry. And she's like, nah, I do. I really have to worry.
You do not understand the gravity of the threat.
She's like, Mom, you don't have it.
How's your day?
Long. Been working since 7 o'clock this morning. I'm done.
Yeah.
Done with that job.
What do you do for work?
I'm a lawyer.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
What side of, what part of law?
Banking.
Wow.
Wow. So you're different. You've got both the brains. You've got the left brain and the right brain.
I'm doing something. I don't know what it is. I'm rocking up. And I'm guessing.
It's interesting. I mean, we should. Yeah, we will. I'm recording now, so we can touch on it now. We can touch on it later.
I'm still recording, so we can.
Interesting how those two.
Go for it.
How the two worlds intersect for you, or if there's any intersection whatsoever, or if you'd like to keep them completely separate to satisfy different parts of yourself.
They really, don't interact at all, except that, at this point you have to have a day job to fund a career in music, unfortunately. So it's mostly just about balancing out the work so I can actually do the music. So that's probably the extent of the interaction. I don't think most people at work have an idea what this project is.
Yeah, interesting. So it is very separate.
Pretty much, yeah. Like there are a few people that I'm tight with at work who know about it, but it's that's just, it just doesn't come up. It also just doesn't come up. So no, they are completely separate. But I work for a bank that has a big office up on the Central Coast, so I interact with Central Coast people every day. Yeah.
There we go. So there is a coast connection in there somewhere. We just got to look hard enough, basically.
Yeah, it's there. There's the Wyong office. It's there.
Hey,
There we go.
I work in Wyong.
The Wyong office.
Yeah, I always have people come up with their I'm at the Wyong office, and I'm like, hi. One day I'll get up there, say hello.
Absolutely. But we've got you not to talk about your banking law. We are here, and you are here to talk about your music under Meadowhip, which we were really stoked to realise we'd been pronouncing correctly.
We were so stressed.
Long and checkered history with mispronouncing artists or project names, and this one I think we've got it correct. Is that
That is correct. I got to a point where it was being mispronounced so frequently that in my bio now I have to put a little explanation of how it's pronounced. Because I was like, I'd be stoked to hear something on the radio, and then they would say the name, and I'd be like, no, what have I done?
Yeah, that's the latest from Meadowhip.
Yeah, that. Oh, yes, there was many of those. I'm like, all right, well, I brought that on myself, so.
What's the what's the symbolism, or I guess the meaning behind the name?
Honestly, I was just, I'm a poet as well as a songwriter, and I just have like a thing with words. I have like words that I think sound cool together and that have like create meaning when they're like sort of crammed together. And I was trying to come up with a name for this project, and I was just like, what are my favorite words that sort of describe what I think the essence of this is, like, because there is so many aspects of this. And I was like, there's softness to it, and there's kind of like sharpness to it, there's like different things. And I just had all of this like list of words, and I was sort of like putting them together, and I was like, oh, Meadowhip, that works, because it's like a little bit snarky and like stingy, but like it's soft and flowery too. So I'm like, that's it.
And what came first for you, the poetry or the music?
The music.
The music.
The music, for sure, because I've been writing music since I was a kid, but they're quite different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of foreshadowed my next question. Is there much of a relationship between the poetry and the music? Do you find yourself leaning on maybe poetic techniques or parts of your poetry brain when you're writing lyrics, or do you keep the two completely separate in your brain?
I kind of have to stop myself from going down too far into the poetry realm when I'm writing the lyrics, because it can get sort of like overly metaphorical and no one but me can follow it. Like, it gets lost in the music, you know, like if you were just reading words on a paper, you can analyze them, you can read them a few times over, and you can get meaning out of it. But when you're listening to a song, there's so much other stuff happening that it's kind of gets lost. So I feel like with lyric writing, I have to really push myself to be a little bit more straightforward. So I'm kind of fighting against the poetic side quite a bit. But I find that they are quite separate. Like, I sort of, in terms of writing, go through phases of gravitating towards one or the other. And 2025 has been a big songwriting year. The poetry has sort of like been hanging out since maybe April.
So is there one that you typically enjoy more than the other, or is it literally down to, you know, whatever you're feeling more inspired by as you're doing it?
Yeah, I think it's based on inspiration, and they feel like quite different. I feel like with a poem, it's kind of like cracking a code. Like, if I know when the poem is finished, because I'm like, oh, I've cracked the code. It's like solving a crossword puzzle. I'm like, oh, it's done. Whereas with a song, it's never done. It's never done until you just run out of money to do another round of reviews, you know?
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, you could, like, there's so many things going on with a song that you could change, and it becomes like it's not self-contained in the same way that a poem is. So I get a lot of satisfaction out of completing a poem and being like, that is done. Whereas with a song, I just get anxiety.
Yeah, because I guess, like you're saying there, with a poem, once you find the rhyme, I guess it's like, okay, cool, that's done, move on to the next. But with a song, yeah, there's, what if we tweak the sound of this element of the piano, or what if we adjust this? And, you know, you're changing your flow and tempo perhaps more than you do when you're, you know, doing a poem as well.
With poetry, you're so limited in what you can do to tell a story. But you can tell story with sounds, and you can tell story with even something like you said, like tempo, or, you know, how long a song is, like that impacts the meaning of it. And it just, every tiny little thing you change, it's like, damn it, hold on.
Yeah. Quickly on poetry. Do you ever take on slam poetry?
You know what? I've gone to see slam poetry, and I'm just like, how do you do that? Like, I have performed my poetry before, and I'm just like, oh, I don't have it in me to be like super passionate and stuff like that. I'm like, I pick my poems that I think are like funny, because I'm like, I'm not brave enough to be that like passionate without a band behind me. But I like watch it, and I watch people making up poems on the spot, and I'm like, how do you do that? Like, I'm so impressed by it. And I find it like really inspirational, but I just could never. I need some confidence lessons or something to be able to even contemplate that.
Yeah, I feel like you're either in one of two camps. You're either that's so impressive, or it's you're just saying random words. It doesn't count. So that's why I was curious whether you had a take on it, because there's two different camps when it does come to slam poetry. Interesting though that you said you're having a band behind you and having it masked with music. That's when you can feel vulnerable. Whereas opposed to in your poetry, it's I'll try and find something funny because at least there's something to hide behind. In that essence.
Story of my life. Story of my life. Yeah, that's it. It's like if you had the less people you have on the stage, and the more it's just you, the more it's like, oh my god, like I'm responsible for all of this now. And when you're reciting poetry on stage, like you're responsible for literally everything that's happening, and that's like, oh no, people are going to know me too much. Should I let them know me? And the answer is no. No.
It's a hard no.
For their sake, no.
And if we can dive into the Meadowhip project, it had a very interesting birth, I suppose. And in one of the bios I read of you, and you were featured in our Who's Who in the Last Two article, the most recent one, which, as you're listening to this, would have been released a fortnight ago. But this project was born during your recovery from what is a major hemorrhagic stroke, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, back in 2019. So please correct my pronunciation and tell us a little bit about that experience as much as you're comfortable with, and how the project was born from that.
Yeah, like I've been in bands and been writing music my whole life. Been in various groups and performing and writing music in so many different capacities. And was in a band in 2019 where, was writing and performing and releasing music. 2019 I went on a holiday and I was in the States, and we were trying to do like a hiking holiday in Yosemite, and I just dropped one day. Had a massive stroke over there. Don't have a stroke in the States, it's very expensive. Oh. And if you're going to do it, get travel insurance. So that took me about, I want to say like a good 8 months to recover from. You can't work, you can't do anything. Like there was a period of time where I couldn't even see, like I had like triple vision. It was horrible. You spend a lot of time just like thinking. You just like think. And when you have like a sort of like near-death experience, it's kind of like, oh no, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? I'm a banking lawyer, for God's sake, what's going on? So I was just like, I just want to write music at pace. And that's really tricky when you're in a band, because you're like trying to get the other person to keep up with this desire to push. And I just had all of these songs written, and I was like, I just have to figure out another way to release them then. And I just started the project because I just had this like really intense, it's almost like a need to just get music out and sort of focus on that. So that's where Meadowhip came from, because I was like impatient, basically. It's like, get it out.
And tell us how, I can't remember, so it was the flute or the clarinet, or there was a particular, the flute. Tell us a bit how that also aided your recovery from the stroke.
Yeah, there's all different types of advice after you have, a brain injury like that about how to recover. It's kind of tricky for them to figure out what part of your brain is impacted and what you should do about it. So it was always like, try different things and see what sticks, try something new every month just to keep yourself on your toes, just to make sure there's no cognitive issues or issues with motor skills or whatever. So I was like, the whole time I was in the hospital, I was like deeply obsessed with Lizzo, and I'm like, I'm going to learn how to play the flute. That's going to be my recovery. And so I got home and I was just like, that's it. I went out with my partner and bought like a beginner sort of like student flute and just emailed the local flute teacher, and I was like, let me in. Let me in. And I've been doing it ever since. I still go to the same teacher on the same day every week. Progress is slow. But it's so much fun. Like it's weird for me to have like a musical activity that's a hobby. anything musical I kind of turn into work. And yeah, having the flute, which is just kind of like a fun thing, is magical. I love it.
Okay, we're back. So I'm curious about how much you're allowing the flute to come into your music job as well, because are you keen to keep that balance and that expressive part of yourself that can be kind of, kept in the hobby basket, or are you itching to include it more and more in your music the more you progress?
It's tricky. I'm thinking about the songs that I have sort of in the can to release in 2025, and most of them have flute, and I've been bringing it on stage with me as well. So I ruin everything. I turn everything into a job. But it is one of those things where I'm like, I don't have any sort of expectations of myself necessarily. Like when it comes to like music production or writing or singing or anything like that, I'm like, it has to be good, like it has to be perfect, has to get better. And I've got this like really intense mentality about a lot of that stuff, whereas with flute I'm like, some weeks I'm shit at it. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of pretty chill about it. So I do, want to incorporate it into things, but it doesn't have that same amount of pressure for me yet.
Yeah, I don't want to conflate your musical career with me performing on stage at high school variety night, but
it's about the same. It's about the same.
About to. In year 10 or 11, I can't remember which one it was, but I performed sort of in 3 acts that night, one of which I played a ukulele in like a group thing, another one I joked around with a tambourine, and the third one I was actually performing guitar. And the first 2, like I'd performed at variety nights before, and I always had a bit of nerves before I walked on stage. Playing the tambourine and the ukulele, I didn't feel any nerves. I was like, oh, this is fun. And I was like, maybe it's just, I'm a bit older now. I've done it a couple of times. And then I walked out for my guitar one, and I was like, oh, I'm nervous. Why am I nervous? And I was like, it's because I care. Because this is the instrument I'm meant to be good at playing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be judged on that, as opposed to, oh, look at me, I'm playing a tambourine and dancing up and down the hall with my mate and we're having fun.
Yeah.
It's, very different. So, like I said, I don't want to conflate what I did in high school with your actual musical career, but I think there can be a connection drawn with how you see the flute compared to your other side of music.
No, I think it is like that. Like it's kind of almost like a novelty and like just like a cute thing that, I don't see. Although in R&B music, I'm seeing there's like a flute comeback, which I'm majorly supportive of. But like I don't really see a lot of people playing flute on stage, and when I do have seen bands where there's flute on stage, like no one knows what the hell's going on. They just go, flute, there's a flute. So I feel like you don't even have to play it well. It's never in tune when you're on stage anyway, because like the temperature fluctuation. So it's like, who cares? Like no one knows what's going on. When people mime playing the flute to me, they always do this weird thing where they've got both hands facing that way like that. So I'm like, no one knows what's happening anyway. Like the pressure is minimal, but everyone can tell if you're singing and you hit a bung note. That's everyone can hear that. So I think it's the same thing. Yeah,
you've just outed me as very ignorant, because that is how I would have mimed playing the flute.
Right.
And I didn't even know that you could tune a flute either. That's news to me too.
It's literally just like pulling it out and hoping that you get the right note, as far as I can tell.
And are there temperature considerations, I heard you say?
Yeah, like if it's in a hot room, like it changes, or if it's really cold, it changes. Like it's really bizarre. Like I can tune it outside and come into a room and it's a completely different note. I'm like, well, I mean, whatever. It's never going to sound right. So
it's interesting because speaking to you, Cara, clearly your approach to producing music and writing music, it appears to be this very driven, almost perfectionist approach. But how much of that translates into on stage? Because what you were describing then with the flute is that almost, and I think a lot of people can resonate with this when they see live music, is it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. It's much more about the energy of the room and the energy that you convey on stage and what you give to the crowd and what the crowd gives back to you. So how much of that approach to making music translates onto the stage, or do you approach those two things very differently?
Definitely approach them differently. Like, I like to be prepared. Like, rehearsal is like a big thing for me. I like to sort of create as much muscle memory as possible. But I feel like I'd much rather watch a show where people are being themselves and being interactive and they look relaxed and they look like they're having a good time than to watch someone just hit notes perfectly or, you know, do their run on their guitar perfectly. Like, it's not, that's nice, but I can go and watch an orchestra. Like, I want to see the person. Otherwise, I could just listen to, you know, a track on Spotify. But, you know, I want to see what they're like. I want to get an essence of them. And I'm like, oh, I'm really great at that. I've got no filter. I've got no self-control or any impulse control. So, like, I can do that. I can do that part.
And how much of being a spectator and lover of music has actually helped when you're going to put on a live show yourself? Because you just said when you go to see a show, that's what you like to see as a member of the audience.
Yeah.
So you're obviously very conscious of that when you're then performing on stage to an audience.
I'm conscious of it, again, in rehearsal when I have these ideas about how I'm going to present and the sorts of things I might say or how I might introduce a song or something. And then when it comes down to it, I'm just very odd on stage. Like, there's no getting around how awkward I am on stage. I'm just like, oh, this is a song about my dog. Like, but I guess that's what I'm like. So that is me. But you know, it would be great if I was cooler than I am. But we can't all be really cool. Some of us are just daggy. So.
Well, I'm interested because I mean, when I was reading your bio, writing about your new EP and getting messy specifically was the song that we featured, which I absolutely loved. And in that, you described yourself as Calamity Queen. So is that the calamity that you were referring to in that bio that you're describing to us now? Because what I would say about that EP is that it is anything but. It is so smooth. It is so cool. It is so soulful and all of those. It's just a joy to listen to. So. Tell us about that EP and I suppose, how those two parts of your personality collide or avoid each other or however they interact.
I mean, I feel like I have an idea of how I would love, and I'm sure most people have this, I have an idea of how I would love to present to the world and like be really like put together and like really sophisticated and suave and stuff like that. And some of my writing sort of reflects that desire a little bit, but if you drill down to the lyrics, like most of my songs I'm just recognizing that I'm a basket case, like I'm just as useless as the next person, right? So I think that if I was left to my own devices, it would sound very different, but fortunately I have producers where I can say I want it to sound real smooth. I want it to sound real jazzy. Like, imagine that I'm a really fancy lady in a jazz club and I'm serenading someone. Let's make it sound like that. And I've got someone who can keep me on track. If I was left to my own devices, I think it would sound more chaotic than it does. So I get there by admitting to myself that I'm not actually a sophisticated lady and asking people to try and keep me on track.
and that also I find quite interesting because we touched on right at the start with your day job and music and, you know, your left brain, your right brain. Because for your day job, I imagine you'd have to be very, like, regimented. You'd have to be quite structured, where in your music you're taking a different approach and you're, you know, having fun on stage and then you're going, I'm a bit of a goofball, let's hand it over to a professional to sort of make it sound a bit more cohesive or, you know, however you want to describe it. Is that a conscious decision to make your music more fun or free-flowing, or is that just how you've just always approached it?
It's funny you say that because I recently had to do like one of the, I don't know if anyone's ever done these things, there's like Hogan assessments at work. It like tests your personality to like see what you're like and how you are at work, and essentially the outcome is I'm just exactly the same at work as I am everywhere else. Like, I don't have like a work personality. I'm the same idiot there as I am here. So the conversation that I'm having with you right now is how I present in meetings at work. And I'm not exaggerating at all. So it's weird. Like, I don't necessarily have that division. So I don't think anyone at work would think that I was orderly or put together or sophisticated either. But you hire a photographer and you hire a producer, you can pretend just for like a couple days.
It's fantastic though, and it's that beautiful dose of realness that I think a lot of parts of the world need. So definitely don't change that part about you. But if we can talk about the EP that we have been referencing, it's your new EP. It's called Inside Out. What I found really interesting about this was that it's a mix of new music and a new original music from you, but also reimagined acoustic versions of songs that you've released in the past. And that track that I mentioned before, Getting Messy, is an example of that. I went back and listened to the original as well because I just wanted to compare the two. And we have this super smooth, jazzy kind of R&B styling with in the newer version compared to maybe like a more produced, maybe more pop oriented, for maybe lack of better describing abilities, but still within that R&B realm as well. So I'm interested in the release strategy because it's not something we see a lot of, but we speak a lot about the way streaming has changed how artists can approach releasing music, and instead of you coming with this whole original new body of work, you can release music in a way where I'm going to go back, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to mix it with the new stuff, and it is all new and it is all different, and I'm going to package that together. So tell us a little bit about the process in terms of where you landed on that decision to produce the EP in that way.
I've kind of always been interested in doing an acoustic version of at least a song, right? And I released a song last year with a fellow Woolongong artist, Benjamino, and we were touring it, and we were playing the song live, like in these like sort of more stripped back ways. And I was like, why don't we do an acoustic version of this? We're still touring it, so it makes sense to release it again, like to release another version of it, and we're playing it more in that way. So why don't we do that? And as soon as we started the process, I was like, oh, this is delightful. Like, now the song, it just sounds different. It almost like means something different. And I started thinking, like, oh, what other songs of mine that we play in that more stripped back set do I think sound different? And I feel like Getting Messy and Am I Broken, to me, the original versions are kind of like snarky and like tongue-in-cheek, and when we were playing them in these stripped back sets, they became kind of like a little bit sad and like a little bit raw, and I was like, they could mean something different. Like if you look at the lyrics, they could have a different meaning, right? So I was just playing around with it, and I was like, oh, I can't choose which one I want to do the acoustic version of. I was like, oh, bugger it, let's just do them all. Like, I can make a collection out of this. And then, you know, I had songs that were already sort of acoustic and they didn't really have a home, but I really liked them. And then I had a song that was sort of way more vulnerable than I would ever be willing to release otherwise. And I was like, this has a home here because these are all sort of like more vulnerable renditions of things. Like, this is where this ought to live. Because I can't release this on its own because that's too scary.
Isn't it fascinating though? Like, it goes back to what we're talking about the multi-levelness of songwriting compared to poetry, because you strip a song back and then it can take on a completely different meaning. Yeah,
it's like when I wrote Am I Broken, I wrote it in sort of like a group setting at a songwriting retreat, and I thought it was so funny. I was playing around with the lyrics, and I kept working on it for a few months afterwards, and I was doing things with the lyrics. I was like, that is hysterical. Like, this, I am writing a comedy here. And I remember someone listened to it like a few months after it was released and was like, oh, this is quite sad. I'm like, what? What do you mean? And then I was quite conscious of that while I was performing it on the tour last year, and I was like, it kind of is. Like, it kind of is. And I just thought it would be cool to see what it sounded like if I let it have that meaning. And yeah, it still has that sort of like groove and like funkiness to it, but it is like the vocals are way more like unprocessed and raw and stuff like that, and it does sort of have a different significance, I guess.
You've done what all good cover songs do, and they take a song and change it and make it their own and almost have it feel like it's taking on a new meaning. You've done that, but with your own music, so that is incredible.
Don't have to worry about copyright if it's your own song.
And also, I mean, thematically, Getting Messy, if I was reading it correctly, is about our relationship with phones late at night, how that can play into our own anxiety, how it can keep us up. Is that a correct read of it lyrically?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I think it would mean something different to everybody. If people are like me, like I have ADHD, and part of that is like I'm on like a new hyperfixation just every couple months, and I will have this phone in my hand and I'll be like 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll be like, just let me check this, just let me check this, and I'm just like wormholing all over the bloody internet, like finding out things about this hyperfixation. And it's kind of like, to me, the song is like the frustration of doing that, because I'm like, oh my god, tomorrow's going to be so awful because I haven't slept, and you know, I don't need this information, it's just crazy, like that I don't need this much data inside my head. And it's sort of like that frustration with yourself for like allowing yourself to get like so hung up on something like that, and just using your phone to, I shouldn't have one, I shouldn't be allowed.
It's just a blanket rule, I think, for society.
No phone, I can't get off TikTok, it's terrible.
No phone. No, I just that line, you know too much. It just resonated, and also the idea that we all these things that we consume, that in that moment they do something for us, but you could not tell anybody what you looked at online 3 days later, let alone a week later. And that line as well, in particular, I went, yes, I can completely sympathise and empathise with what you're describing there.
Yeah, I mean, even if I did tell people what I was looking at 3 o'clock in the morning, I fear that I would just come across as deranged. Like currently mapping out all the relationships between female soccer players in the WSL, and I'm like, who's dating who used to date the other person, oh my god, I'm like, I would sound absolutely deranged if I was like, I know this about this person and that person and this person. I'm like, oh, you should know that, that's crazy.
No, Sam Kerr is just really good friends with the American
sports
after that.
Sports.
Yeah, exactly. I love seeing a comment. It's like, oh, they're what a good friend, like such good friends. It's like, well, I've got news for you, mate.
News for you, they're having a baby. That took over last week for me. I was like, damn, I was trying to sleep. Now what's this? Something else for me to obsess over.
Thank you for our obligatory sports reference in this podcast as well. We often drop them, and it is usually football or soccer related.
Excellent.
Absolutely. I'm imagining on the wall, that's the one that we can't see behind you. There's, what are those, you know, where you've got the pin and the string, and it's like all our midfielders or female football players, and it's their relationships, dating.
Look, it's in my mind like that. Just the red thread and the pins, on the corkboard. It's a crime investigation.
Do you have just before we move off from sport, do you have like a WSL team that you follow?
I do. I follow Arsenal like everyone else, because that's where the majority of the Tillies were. But now it seems like there's as many people in the Spurs, so I'm like, but they're not as good, so
and they're also arch rivals.
They are.
To change allegiances from Arsenal to Tottenham is just, I
couldn't do it. Actually, my partner is a big Juventus fan, and Arsenal played Juventus the other day, and beat them, like absolutely flogged them. And he didn't speak to me for like a good half hour after that. I was like, sorry.
It's because Juventus no longer have Joe Montemiro, the Aussie coach.
Yeah, right.
With Lyon, I think he is now. So
did he move that? Okay, well.
Yeah, well, on that rivalry, what was it? Karakuni Cross nearly broke the internet when he was seen with a scarf from the opposition in the stands there. Some serious ramifications. It is real business, those rivalries. But In terms of your music, you just have released this Inside Out EP. Are you planning to tour off it? Because as soon as I listened through that EP, I was just trying to imagine how nice it would be to experience that music live.
I would love to. It's weird because I feel like I toured it last year before it was even a thing, but no one knew that that's what I was doing. And it's only been since I released it that people have been like, "Are you going to play this live?" And I'm like, "Damn, I thought I already had. Like, I felt like this was the cap of that." So, but I do have like a really good band that could really pull this together. So I'm in the process of putting something together now because people seem to think that I should, and I don't know what I'm doing. So if someone's going to suggest it, then I'll take that on. But yeah, like even playing some of the songs, like I played recently, you know, when they do the big shows at the, like Kudos Bank Arena or the Accor Stadium or whatever they are, and they have the sort of festival site outside. So played recently when Coldplay were playing. We played at the festival site.
Oh, cool.
And played with that band, and the songs just sound really pretty. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do something. So I'm in the process of organising something, but it probably wouldn't be until maybe February next year at the earliest, because a couple of my band people are going on holidays over Christmas and New Year's. So, yeah.
You've gone about the process backwards. You did the live tour, and then you've gone, let's release the EP. When traditionally, I guess more people would release the EP and then go on tour to celebrate it. So maybe you're the big brain thinker and you've done it the right way, and everyone else is going about it wrong. Look,
I don't think I'm the only one. Like, I feel like independent artists, like, you just guess the whole time. You just guess. You're just releasing music and going, I don't know. Like, I have to put a reel up now. Okay, now I have to put something on TikTok. And just guessing. And it honestly didn't even cross my mind. I had it on a list. I had an old list of like this whole release strategy, and I had it on the list. It was like live shows, ! But I lost that piece of paper until recently, so I had to come back to that now.
And February is actually pretty close, really. So it's not too far away. But for those who may be coming along to those shows, what could they expect? Because we have this kind of acoustic EP, which I'm sure you're keen to feature the music from that. But also a lot of your previous music goes in other directions. So how do you craft a show around that catalogue?
With tracks, that's the benefit of, like, you can have something quite warm and acoustic, and like for like the majority of the songs, and then you go, okay, I want to play something that's like quite electronic, and then the track comes in, which is the benefit of it. And the drummer that I use is great at like activating the tracks. I don't know what's going on. I just give him the music files and he does magical things, and I just stand at the front and go, oh yeah, it's working. So with that, like, and the band are just very cohesive in the way that they're just very good at conveying the mood. Like, if I say to them, you know, it has to be, I want this to like flow quite smoothly over here, they're like, yeah, it's done. I don't know how they do it, but they're very good. So I think mostly it'd be like probably the majority of it I would like to think would be acoustic, with like a few of the older ones as more electronic, because they mostly do translate to acoustic. That's the benefit of doing things like in that sort of neo-soul R&B style, is that they sound quite nice as acoustic tracks. And then just like lots of me being awkward.
You can do a reverse of another obligatory reference. Taylor Swift on her Eras tour, when she was doing an acoustic set within her massive 3.5 hour show, you can do an acoustic show and then have a little electronic set.
I could do that. I'll get out some like some what are they called, like some decks, and do some DJing or something.
I like it. Quickly too, on your name, Cara. My sister is also Cara, also spelt with a C, and she struggles to find anything with her name on it. It's always with a K.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything with my name on.
That hasn't been like personally engraved or anything, but
No,
you know,
exactly,
you go
that's
to a
what I was
souvenir shop and they've got names already engraved on bookmarks or whatever the case
Yeah,
is.
no, I don't
She's
think I
never
have.
found her name spelt with a C.
No.
Is this
Yeah,
a
no,
struggle that you two have experienced, or if you say to someone, you know, they go, "What's your name?" and you go, "Cara," oh, with the C, you always need to explain.
Yeah, they have to ask.
Yeah.
And if they don't ask, they assume it's a K. And I'm like, well, I'll answer to it. But the government
Verbally,
won't
it's the same thing.
recognize it. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I don't know. I haven't looked for anything with my name on it for a while, but it was always a problem when I was a kid. Yeah. Yeah.
And-
I could never get a key ring.
And you said you spent some time in the States. The pronunciation over there is very different too.
Depending on where you are. And I don't, the name's not very common over there, so it was like kind of like, what is this name? But they'll like ask you how to pronounce it, and they'll be like, oh, okay, that's weird, and they'll try and do it, and it sounds very strange in their mouths. But yeah, they're funny. They're like, oh, Cara. I'm like, oh, whatever you like, I'll answer to it.
The American version that really gets me is Craig.
Craig.
They say Craig.
Do they say Craig?
They say
Craig.
Craig. Yeah.
Kidding. That's
Yeah,
so
it's
funny.
silly.
It's like, no, that's just a different name.
It's a different name, right? Craig. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really like when I think of the name Craig, it's not a name I've heard through an American accent before. I don't think.
Craigslist.
Craig. Yeah. Okay, there we go. That's funny as.
When I was over there, though, I lived in Massachusetts. So it was like a lot of people that were really thick Boston accent, which was really tricky to get used to as an Australian. It was like, I never heard that before. And I was like, what the hell are they saying? Is this real? Like, this sounds like you're putting something on. That was an interesting one. Boston accent. Very entertaining.
Yeah, definitely very, very entertaining. Just out of curiosity, did they ever give you an answer as to what caused the stroke that kind of has got you onto this journey, or was it just one of those things?
Still trying to figure it out, man. Like, when I was in the hospital, I was like, what? Why did this happen? And they're like, just happens sometimes. And I was like, that is such an inadequate answer. And I don't think the neurosurgeon is, like, not trying to figure out why. They're just trying to figure out how to fix it, right? So I'm still, like, it's been nearly 6 years, and I'm still at the doctor, like, every month or so, being like, new test, find out what it is. Because, like, ever since I've had it, I've been, like, my health has just taken a nosedive. Like, it's just a nightmare. So I'm like, they're still trying to figure it out. One day I'll know. But I get, like, an MRI every year. I'm like, is it back? Are there any more?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, there's no more aneurysms. Leave it. I'm like, okay.
That's what I was going to say, because there'd be a fear that if they don't know what caused it, that it could just occur again.
Absolutely. Like, the neurosurgeon is like, we've checked you every year for 5 years, and, it hasn't come back, and there's no new one. So, we can skip a couple of years. And I'm like, no, we can't. Because I need to know. I need to know what's going on in there. Sorry. You can't tell me I had an aneurysm and then not go, are there more? So, I sort of feed into my own anxiety with that, but yeah. But they say the most bizarre things to you in hospital. They're like, oh, people could just have aneurysms walking around and they just have no idea. I'm like, don't say that to me. What do you mean?
That's not helpful.
And, like, people will come up to you afterwards. They'll be like, oh, my auntie had an aneurysm. I'm like, oh, how is she? Like, oh, she died from it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Not what I needed to hear.
Cool. That's sick. So people are very strange with that sort of stuff, but still don't know why. It's one of the, they don't, like, I don't think they look into it a lot. I don't think a lot of people survive them, to be honest.
Yeah, it's insane, and I suppose the plus side to it all. Do you see yourself in the situation that you're in now, and having forged the path that you have with your music, if not for that experience?
I think it's funny to me, like, everything I did beforehand I took so seriously, to the point where I kind of prevented myself from taking steps forward. Like, any time that I released music, it was art. It was like, there was a lot of agonizing around it. It was a very slow process. Whereas, like, now I'm kind of like, whatever. Like, it's just do it. Like, it's going to be fine. Like, and I don't, that's, don't get me wrong, I still agonize, but not to that extreme, because I'm like, we're all going to be dead soon. Who cares? Like, just do it. Like, and that kind of mentality, I 10 years ago, I would never been able to imagine myself being like that. Such an anxious girly. But now it's very liberating to almost die. Because it's like, second chance. It's all free now. It's all free.
Yeah. It's incredible how it's just completely flipped your perspective on, and it could have easily gone the other way too. It could have easily gone, oh wow, life is so precious, let me take everything more regimented and more serious. But it's actually gone, you know what, at the end of the day, it doesn't, we're just a speck. You can look at it real, like, wide scale, especially if you're in the Grand Canyon or something. You're like, man, I'm worthless compared to everything else that has come before and after. And
that's the sort of stuff I say to people, and it freaks people out when I say stuff like that. I'm like, oh, who cares? In 50 years, we'll all be dead. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, sorry. I forget that we're not all insane like I am. Like, but people get freaked out by it. Like, if they haven't had that sort of brush with like a serious illness or something, they do get freaked out when you're a bit nihilistic like that.
And there is definitely liberation in understanding our insignificance. And my dad routinely will just tell me or remind me of the existence of the pale blue dot video on YouTube, which I think is...
Pale blue dot video?
Look it up. I think it relates exactly what we're saying. It's pale blue dot. It's narrated by Carl Sagan, I think. And it's basically
Sagan?
It's Carl Sagan. And it's just zooming out of planet Earth and reminding us how absolutely insignificant we are in the scheme of everything else. And it's a very good perspective setter, because we can get so caught up in everything else, and to have that reminder is and can be liberating. Yeah,
like you think you get into, especially in early adulthood, like you get this thing in your head that everything is so deeply important. Everything matters so much. And it's like nothing that could possibly happen in my life could really matter that much. Like, I'm just one person living in a very fortunate country. Like, let's be so real. Like, nothing matters to me. So, that's great. I'll have to Google that, because I love that shit now. That would have freaked me out. That would have freaked me out like 6 or 7 years ago. But now I'm like, I understand.
And now we have a better insight into your 3 a.m. TikTok doom scrolls as to what kind of content the algorithm's serving you up.
Horror. Horror.
Stuff that really helps you go to sleep,
Yeah, I can't. It's, I'm not now listening to audiobooks just to try and fall asleep. I'm just like, I need, what's his face? Stephen, who's the guy that is that English guy that narrates stuff? Stephen... Oh, this is going to piss me off. I call him Stefano every night. He narrates all the Harry Potter books, and I just have him just banging on in the background. I'm like, it's the only way I can fall asleep at this point.
Dudley, who was so large his bottom drooped over either side of the kitchen chair, grinned and turned to Harry. "Pass the frying pan!" "You've forgotten the magic word," said Harry irritably. The effect of this simple sentence...
I'll tell you who's a really good narrator. I don't know his name, but he plays Ned Stark in Game of Thrones.
Oh, really?
It was luxuries like air conditioning that brought down the Roman Empire. With air conditioning, their windows were shut. They couldn't hear the barbarians coming.
If there are no dogs in heaven, then when I die, I want to go where they went.
I like a relaxing voice. Especially if they're saying things to me that I don't care about. I'm like, cool. Awesome.
It's more about the voice than the words.
Yeah.
It's
white noise.
As is this podcast.
It devolves to there sometimes, but I'll get it back on track. 2025 is fast approaching. You spoke about your plans to tour maybe around February, early in the year. In terms of releasing and moving forward, what are the plans? And we understand you also are part of a duo called Territory. So that would obviously be occupying some of your time as well, we imagine.
Kind of. Territories has kind of become more of like a writing partnership. Rather than a releasing and performing partnership. So Jimmy, my bandmate, and I, we write quite a bit, and we've written some Actually, one of the songs that I'm going to be releasing in 2025 is a song that we wrote together. Like when I was still very, very sick after the stroke, he came over and we just sat down and wrote something. And I was so unwell. I don't even really remember writing it. But then, like a few months later, when I listened back, I was like, oh, I quite like that. So that's coming out in 2025. So there's like lots of bits and pieces that I've been holding on to that I was kind of like a bit nervous about releasing because they're like maybe a little bit more emotional than the stuff that I would have released otherwise. But I feel like this EP has almost given me sort of like some traction in that space. So there's 5 tracks that I'm sitting on that are ready to go out in 2025. And they're all quite different. Obviously, I mean, not hugely different. They're still in the R&B pop space, but like they're quite different to, what I was releasing previously. So all them, I think next year is going to be a big year of releasing singles.
Because that almost sounds like it could also be a bigger body of work by the end of it too. If there's already 5 ready to go. Okay,
releasing
let's not.
Releasing an EP, it's oh my gosh, it's such hard work. I honestly thought I would have this EP, I thought it'd be out in April. And it just kept going and going, and I was like, why is this taking so long?
Well, you were too busy touring before you released it. That was your problem.
I think also, like, I just had no appreciation for what it meant to record all acoustic instruments. That, like, I had no idea what that looked like, because I'd never even recorded live drums before. Like, that was the whole thing. I was like, what the hell? So I didn't they're asking me, oh, how do you want the drums to sound? I'm like, me? I don't know.
I don't know what plugins you got.
I know. I was like, I don't know. I don't know how to play drums. I don't even know what the drums are called. Like, wow. So that whole thing was, and then like each individual instrument, and like you can't change things on the fly, right? So it just took a way longer than I thought it was going to be. So I'm like, I'm going to let this EP breathe and like be its own thing. And then I think just singles, and just singles like sort of give you as an artist like a bit of freedom to sort of shift around. Yeah, EPs are a little bit cumbersome and scary.
It's interesting. It all ties in. I mean, we've having kind of similar discussions, but in different places and with different people about that whole way of releasing and how it is changing. And I think it's evidenced by that, because you can experiment so much with your sound. You can play around. You can release singles. It'll still reach your audience. It doesn't have to be packaged up, and people will consume it, in similar ways as well. So we can definitely expect a big 2025 by the sounds of it, with some experimentation, some touring, and some continuation of the stuff that we've loved from you so far.
And maybe a little bit more poetry, because I feel like I've abandoned that a little bit in the last 6 months.
I was going to ask that question. What percentage of your free time is poetry and what percentage is dedicated towards music? At
the minute, it's like a solid 10% poetry, 90% music. But it's ordinarily a more even split.
And is that ideally where it would be for you? Like 50-50 even split?
Yeah, I feel like music is a little bit more excruciating for my nervous system. I put a lot of pressure on myself for that, whereas with poetry it kind of feels a little bit more sort of internal and something that I do for me, and like it's not one of those things where you just release it out into the ether. Like if you want someone to hear your poetry, you have to pitch it to a magazine and you have to do those sort of submission processes, and someone might never hear it or might never read it. So it's kind of more internal in that way, and I feel like less pressure because of that. Whereas I feel like if you're going to put the time and effort into getting a song produced, put it out regardless of how you feel about it at the end, So yeah, it's I think 50-50 is a better balance for my mental health.
And do you envision a realm where the two would you ever incorporate poetry into maybe some of your live music or anything like that, or your as you kind of spoke?
I actually have before. Yeah, read some poetry that is like on the same sort of topic as a song as an introduction to songs before in live sets. Like I'll read a poem and then like it'll be, okay, this is a poem about, like the poem's very self-explanatory, like once you hear it, and then you hear the song afterwards and then you go, anyway, that was about my dog, and you kind of like, that's like a little thing that's kind of makes sense on stage. It's kind of hard for me to figure out how you would do that off stage. Like if I'm releasing music, I don't really know how to attach poetry to that yet. I am contemplating that. That's something that one of my mentors is like, figure out how to do that. I'm like, because I write two themes, like that's probably the consistent thing in the poetry and the music, is that the themes are pretty consistent. So like I can mix and match poems to songs pretty easily. And there is an opportunity to do that, but I'm like, how? Because we don't consume music in a physical medium really that much anymore. So it's hard to figure out how you could do that when you're doing most everything online.
Have you tried having a poem that you've written and then going, let's just see if I can play some music to this poem to turn it into a song?
Yeah, I have done that to disastrous results. My poetry is not like, it's not like your typical poetry that has like a lot of rhyming or anything in it. It's like it's not very repetitive. It's like, it's giving Bob Dylan, it's giving like, no. And I have done that where I'm like, this could be a song, and I'll sit down and I'll try and play it, and I'm like, oh, Cara, what are you doing? This is awful. The writing style is quite different, and it does sound quite awkward. I feel like maybe someone else could do it, but I don't know, if I get it stuck in my head that it is read in a certain way, or I hear it in a certain way in my head, and then trying to put music to it, it sounds odd. But I wonder if I could hand it over to someone else and they could try it. Now you've given me an idea. Now I have to pursue this. You get a third. You get a third.
I was going to say, as long as we get a cut, that's fine.
Yes. It is genuinely fascinating to speak to you. I think you'd be the first artist that we've spoken to who does have that poetry background as well, and how those two things combine or don't combine. But yeah, one thing we can confirm is that you're really good at making music, and the Inside Out EP is a great example of that. So anyone listening, get out there, listen to it, check it out, and go back to the back catalogue too and compare, as I did, because it was really fun to hear those artistic sides of you. So Meadowhip, thank you so much for coming on and chatting and sharing your story and your journey with us. It sounds like you have a lot coming up in the next year, so we'll be keeping tabs on it, and we hope everyone else is too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. Now I have all these ideas, and I'm going to make a big list. Fast facts about this episode. It was produced by the one and only magical man Cameron Smith. It featured that artist or music personality that you just heard speak for a while. It was recorded on Dark and Chung land. And for more from us, head to www.homebrewed.au. Bye.